Good morning and welcome to the Strategic and Corporate Select Committee, Wednesday the 18th of March 2026. I'm Councillor Dan Roper, Chair of the Strategic and Corporate Select Committee, and I'd like to welcome you all to this meeting. This meeting is being held in person at County Hall and is also being streamed live on the County Council's YouTube channel. A fire alarm test is not expected during the meeting. If the alarms sound, we must evacuate County Hall. In the event of an emergency, please make your way to the nearest exit and meet at the muster points located on the main car park. Item 1, apologies for absence, please.
Thank you, Chair. We have an apology today from Councillor Steve Morphew, who is substituted by Councillor Mike Smith-Clare. Councillors Dewsbury, Jameson and Mason Billig were also due to be here. They have sent their apologies. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Welcome to the meeting, Mike. It's not your first one with us, is it? Hope you have an enjoyable meeting as a substitute. It is noted that we are cabinet memberless today, which is not ideal, but we will press on as best as we can. Item 2, minutes of the last meeting held on Wednesday, the 11th of February. Are we content that they're a true and accurate record? Thank you all. Item 3, updates from the Chair. Firstly, can I welcome the students visiting from the UEA who are in the public gallery? Welcome. Secondly, I can confirm that we have an additional meeting of the Select Committee scheduled for 10 o'clock on Wednesday, the 22nd of April, to consider local government reorganisation in detail following a government decision. We'll formally agree that once we get to the work programming part of the meeting later. Secondly, to update you on a decision at a previous meeting about companies' governance. Excuse me one moment. I would like to make committee members aware that following our item on companies' governance at our January the 21st meeting, a meeting was arranged with myself, the Chair of Audit and Governance Committee, the Chair of Companies' Governance Panel, as per the requested action from the committee. Myself and the Chair of the Company's Governance Panel, Councillor Vardy, discussed the issue of member oversight with the monitoring officer present and came to the following conclusions. Firstly, the issue of member oversight and scrutiny in relation to companies' governance could be further strengthened. Much of this will take place through improvements suggested by the Company Governance Programme. Secondly, we had discussed the addition of relevant chairs of select committees as attendees to the Company's Governance Panel. The monitoring officer agreed that this could strengthen member oversight and scrutiny arrangements, as chairs would be better able to refer matters when required to their committees, and therefore this should be considered when changes are proposed. Thirdly, due to the upcoming local elections planned for May the 7th, it was agreed that this matter should be considered by the new administration of Norfolk County Council following those elections. Given this context, we determined that a working group is not feasible at this time, but have noted that it will be a matter for the new administration to consider attendance of relevant select committee chairs within the company governance panel model. So just to give you that update, and that matter from the previous meeting is closed. Okay, number 4, any declarations of interest, councillors? I see none. Item 5 is public question time. There are no public questions received. And number 6 is local member questions. There are no local member questions received. Which brings us then to item 7, Norfolk Fire and Rescue Service Improvement Progress. This is page 27 of your agenda pack. And I'll ask the Chief Fire Officer, please, to introduce the report.
Yeah, thank you. So the report in front of you highlights the improvement areas that we've been working on as a fire and rescue service. Whilst vital signs are reported regularly through other channels, our wider improvement agenda isn't always as visible. Our last HMI CFRS inspection was in 2023, and although we'd made significant progress, there were actually a number of areas for improvement that we were asked to work on. Of the 16 that were identified, 9 have been completed and 7 are nearing completion, and we're confident that we will have all of them completed prior to the next inspection, which has actually started from a desk-based perspective now, and we will be having inspectors on site throughout May and June. The report also covers 2 thematic reviews that the HMI CFRS did of the entire fire and rescue sector. These are on values and culture, which was published in 2023, and the handling of misconduct in 2024. So they were both in response to issues that had been raised to culture and behaviour across the wider sector. So again, we've made positive progress in there, and we're kind of happy to answer any questions on the actions that we've taken. And the third part of the report talks about our response to national inquiries. So Grenfell Phase 1 and 2 and Manchester Arena. Again, we feel like we've made good progress against these, but would welcome questioning and scrutiny of the approach that we've taken. You'll notice that we've used a brag status, which includes a blue status as well as the traditional red, amber, green. And this was just so that we could be really clear where we've completed and signed off the actions, whereas green, so the blue is where we've completed and the green is on target and progressing as we would expect it to. So I'm happy to answer any questions on any parts of the report. And I have also Area Manager Stefan Ryden with me, who's done a lot of the detailed work, particularly on Grenfell and some of the wider improvements. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Members, do you have any questions? Councillor Long.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. On page 35, it makes reference to the service needs to make sure that equality, diversity and inclusion are the heart of its talent management approach for identifying and developing future and current leaders. Does that equate to the best people for the job?
Yes, so what we're doing through our equality, diversity and inclusion approach is making sure that any barriers that might exist for people have been removed. So, for example, we have a number of people throughout the service who have neurodiversities. So an example of an adjustment that we've made recently is we'll quite often now give people questions in advance of interviews, because what we're not looking for is a memory test. We're looking for people to be able to come with their best examples, and particularly in promotions and progress, we found that some people weren't able to think as quickly on the spot as others. So by putting in standard processes that apply to everybody, it kind of levels the playing field. But Stefan, did you want to come in any further on that?
Yes, and you know, all of our EDI policies are in line with the council policy, so things like positive action, that kind of work. So it's all about not just removing barriers, but also making sure that we're recruiting from the biggest pool that we can. So the more people we can encourage to think this could be a job for them, the greater pool of talent we get. But certainly when it actually comes to running processes, for instance, our latest whole-time recruitment, which started out with 750 candidates, that initial sift was completely blind. There was no data in it at all that would identify gender, ethnicity or anything like that. So as much as possible, all of our stuff is about, you know, making sure that we're removing those barriers, getting the right candidates coming to us, and then it's just all about who are the best candidates on the day.
Thank you, Chairman. That's somewhat reassuring. As I said, you know, we want the best people for Norfolk Fire and Rescue Service. And I mean, one of the examples that Kerry gave there, I mean, I would have thought the ability to think quickly on your feet was an absolute attribute, and you wouldn't have the questions beforehand when you turn up to an emergency situation. You know, you'd think you'd be prepared and have the knowledge, but the situation as it emerges, you know, quick thinking, you know, rather than analytical is probably a skill that needs to be drawn out. So giving people questions beforehand, you know, does that allow quick thinking responses on the spot? No, it probably doesn't, but it allows for those that are neurodiverse to have a more even playing field. And I'm not against that in any way, but I'm just thinking that we need the right skill set to get the very best people. Thank you.
Yeah, and of course it's different in different scenarios, and when we run things like our incident command capability assessments, then of course people are not given the scenario in advance. They don't know what's going to what they're going to be faced with, and you're absolutely right that the ability to think quickly and think on your feet and assess the situation is a core skill that we're looking for. But what we try and do is make sure that anything that could be made more difficult for people who maybe couldn't read a question quickly or may have very practical skills in assessing a fire ground isn't then held back because of other kind of learning environments that might not be as familiar with them. Everybody works differently in different environments, I think it's probably fair to say, but please be assured that an ability to think quickly on the incident ground is absolutely paramount to what we test people for, and to be able to keep calm as well, obviously. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm much more assured now. Thank you.
Thank you. I piggyback onto questions. I think what the Chief Fire Officer is saying is that all of these processes are to recruit the best possible firefighters, and that the D&I objectives here are that within the selection process it enables us to do so from as big a pool as possible, and I think we can all be assured about that. Thank you. Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Chair. My question is regarding page 55, a recommendation for digital radios to replace analogue radios. It says that in general digital radios are more effective, but I was wondering, given the very poor broadband and mobile phone reception in many rural areas, whether we're assured that this would actually work, and what steps you can take to reassure us that, well, for example, places like Clench Wharton, where a high proportion of the area doesn't have very good broadband signals, is this going to lead to problems with communication?
Yeah, so I'm going to ask Area Manager Stefan Ryder to answer this, because he is a national expert in this area, so he can give you a more technical response than I would be able to.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, as Kerry says, I've been on the National Fire Chiefs Council's National Fires in Tall Buildings Working Group, because I led our Grenfell strategy back when I was a station manager. So I think the answer to that is, I think that's probably a terminology issue, because when we're talking about digital radios, that's purely about, these are just what you would probably describe as walkie-talkies, where they just talk to each other. So they're not reliant on broadband networks, on wireless, on cellular communications. So the digital is just in terms of how the handsets actually work and talk to each other. So they are, the versions we're buying do not connect into any of those networks. So they're a little bit irrelevant to how good the signal is. But you're right, that kind of thing is a challenge for us. Things like our command and control facilities, our command unit that comes out to incidents to help us with that. We do have to work on those to make sure they've got the very best connection technology, so that they can work in those kind of black spots. We can connect into multiple different networks and things like that, depending on what the best signal is available. But purely in terms of this work, they work outside of those networks.
Thank you, that's very reassuring. And Chair, might I just ask as well about the new fireground and breathing apparatus radios. There are two sorts, digital and high power or low power, which are safe and environmental protection units. Could you give us a bit more detail about how that works, please?
Yes, absolutely. So what happened in the past was there's a thing called intrinsic safety, which electrical engineers or people who are familiar with that will know. Where if you go into an environment like, let's say, the Bacton gas terminal, you have to have radios that operate on very low power to make sure you're not igniting any of the vapours there. And in the past, some fire services used those kinds of radios for their teams that were going into burning buildings, because potentially the smoke could be ignited. But the ability to ignite smoke is much harder than other flammable gases. And what was found was those very bespoke radios didn't have enough power to get out of a very tall building, because they're obviously large concrete and steel buildings. They're a long way from the ground. What we've got is we've introduced a mix. So we have a small number on our environmental protection units, which is the specialist units that deal with hazardous materials. So if we're going into an environment like Bacton, those would be used. But the general ones that we're using they're enhanced versions of a normal radio. So they're high power, very good communication range, but they have enough protection in them for us to be fairly confident they're not going to ignite smoke if someone's in a house fire, in a structure fire.
Thank you, it's very reassuring.
Thank you. Councillor Proctor.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. When you go back and look to see how many inspections there's been, 2021, 23, and did you say there's another one ongoing this year as well?
Yeah, so the inspection of our service specifically is on a cyclical basis. It's around every 2.5 years, give or take how long the cycles take. So the HMI do them in cycles, and they review all fire and rescue services within that cycle, and then they start a new cycle. So we are just starting our inspection cycle again. So the last one finalised in 2023.
Yeah, so when you take that into context, and what this report then shows, there's been quite significant improvement, I would say, in terms of all the things that were picked up in the first inspection, second, and obviously now demonstrating what can be done. So that is reassuring in general terms. And 2 points of detail. On page 49, there's reference to recommendations 9 and 14 and the barriers to progress, and the 2 bullet points underneath it, I assume, are those barriers. How much weight is that going to take with the inspectors when they come and do the inspection in terms of those not being completed, particularly when you look at the rest, when there's a lot of blues and a lot of greens, an awful lot of blues, and quite rightly so by the sound of it. So how much weight will the inspectors attribute to those?
I think that they don't give a specific weighting against any of the areas for improvement. They do expect you to progress with all of them. Those, particularly the case management system, is quite difficult because the way that we have to carry out case management for fire and rescue is along the Grey Book terms and conditions that apply to firefighters, which is slightly different to some of the terms and conditions that apply to the rest of the county council staff, and therefore having a casework system that's different to the processes employed in the rest of the council has been something that we've been trying to get alignment with HR, and it's been a little bit difficult to get to that point. But again, we are confident that we will have resolved that prior to the inspectorate coming in, so at least they will see that we've got all the structures in place and that we've made progress in that area. In terms of AFI 14, I think it's difficult, again, with the systems that are in place in the wider council for us to answer all of the questions that are specific to fire and rescue, and that's just part and parcel of the structures that we've got here, and some of the challenges that we are having to overcome with those quite generic processes for a county council service, who obviously has lots and lots of different departments with different requirements, and an inspection regime that's been set up just for fire and rescue, because you've got to remember that a lot of fire and rescue services are standalone and can tailor their processes just to their specific workforce. So that's some of the things that we've been kind of working with the HR department on to try and rectify. And if you want to add anything to that stuff.
So these are recommendations from some of the national reports, and when I talk to colleagues from across the National Fire Chiefs Council, across the fire sector, some of them are having similar issues trying to implement everything that the inspectorate has asked for at a national level. I think one of the challenges that has been recognised in Norfolk is that not only do MHCLG ask for slightly different data, but also the HMI is very particular about what data it looks for and how that data is presented. And that data doesn't necessarily, the requirements for that data don't necessarily fit into the My Oracle system, because as a recipient of the shared service, we're all kind of using that somewhat generic HR information system. When HMI are asking for things that don't fit into what that tracks and can report, it can be a real challenge for us in extracting that. And I think that's why we're looking at maybe setting up our own case management system, because it's not about our case management being a problem. We've made real significant improvements. For instance, 2 or 3 years ago, it was taking us on average 168 days to close an investigation, and now it's taking us 68 days, which is an improvement. We still want to drive that improvement, but this is really more about how we record the cases, how we extract the data, how we report on it, and how Kerry can have oversight and being sure that things are being done appropriately and fairly than it is about actual case management.
Well, thanks for that, because I think that gives a bit of reassurance in terms of what the inspector will be looking at. And when you think of all the blues and greens along there, and there's just those two, all right, they stand out. But I suppose the issue there, you can explain it. I think the explanation that's been said today makes a huge amount of sense. So when the inspectors come along, I'm sure that response will be there, and hopefully they'll take a pragmatic approach, shall we say, to what comes out. Thank you.
Thank you. Just piggybacking on Councillor Proctor's question there, just in terms of that AFI 9, there's an interim case management solution in place. How long do you think we'll be running with that interim solution before we move to something more permanent?
There's a multifaceted answer to that. So one of the things that we've recognised, and which we've alluded to in our answer, is that for our wider people management activity, MyOracle isn't a good long-term solution. So along with the Director of HR and the Digital Director, we'd already agreed that an alternative solution was more sensible for FHIR as a core line of business system. So that's been procured. It's a system that we are familiar with in other parts of the business, but that needs to be implemented, and then there needs to be a transition over to that system. Obviously, that needs to happen probably within the next 12 to 18 months because of LGR and devolution on the agenda as well. So that work has started, but I would envisage that we wouldn't make significant changes to Oracle to fit in a interim case management system we've got now, rather than applying it to a new system that we know has already been procured and that we're about to bring in. So I would hope that within 12 to 18 months we'd have a more permanent solution.
Great, thank you very much. Councillor Smith-Clare.
Thank you, Chair. And again, thank you for the report and the work that you do. It's with regards to the progress with strategies in informing the public. You know, we looked at the need for preventing fires and other risks. And from my naive experience, I can see them broken down into two categories, the accidental and the malicious fires. How is that information getting out there, particularly with younger people, and how does that specifically fit within roles and the support with those roles in getting out to those members of the community? Thank you.
So you'll see from the report here and from the community risk management plan that we brought to the last committee for sign-off that we've put a significant amount of effort into our prevention activity, and that is targeted at a number of different approaches. So accidental fires, we look at cyclical themes and trends. So for example, you will see that during the summer we now put out lots of information to help people prevent wildfires, to keep their properties safe. So, you know, even things that a few years ago we wouldn't have thought of around kind of keeping foliage away from housing, taking leaves out of gutters, things that we know can cause significant issues during periods of long, hot, dry spells, barbecues on the beach, those types of things. So we'll have our general comms campaigns about those types of things. We also have some quite innovative schemes running in Norfolk to work with younger people, but particularly those who have started setting fires. We've had a few high schools that we've worked in various parts of the county where we go and do some in-depth preventative work with the high schools, and they've been really successful. I think in Dereham and Thetford we've had some really good results where younger people have maybe not recognised the implications or the potential dangers of some of the activities they're doing. So it ranges from generic comms, targeted comms, looking at specific groups, and then some real interventions where we think there are groups of people who inadvertently, you know, may cause some issues for the wider community.
Yeah, we have to recognise our comms team as well. We do a huge amount of proactive messaging through lots of different social media, and we're looking at the age profiles of who access different types of media so that we can target that appropriately in terms of both accidental and malicious fires. The crucial crew work that we do, going out to something like 6,000 school children every year, really helps to drive that message. And one of the things we're specifically doing now around malicious fires is something called Fire P, which is a programme that I think we're probably only the first or second service in the country to be trialling, and that's direct one-to-one work with people who are about to be released from prison or who've recently been released from prison, particularly where fire setting has been one of the causes of that. And that work, it's not just about discouraging them and making sure they don't go back into those kinds of behaviours, but it's also about getting them back into society. So if you've come out of prison with that kind of history, your employment prospects are quite low, but more importantly, your housing prospects are quite low. Not a lot of people want that. So they can demonstrate that they've done this work with us, and the first person that worked with us is a really incredible story of how their life has been turned around, and they are now in employment, they are in housing, and they put a lot of it down to this intervention that we've done.
While we've been speaking there, I've just remembered that also this week we've got some specific interventions around e-bike safety. So you might have heard some of that on the news this week. So working with trading standards, going out to places like libraries. We're in Kings Lynn, Great Yarmouth, and a number of other locations. So again, raising awareness of actually lots of these technologies are really safe if you maintain and look after them properly. We've done things like swapping out electric blankets, looking at appropriate cooking equipment, those types of things. So we do have a number of different interventions, and we do work with partners such as Trading Standards to look at where products may be part of that issue as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I was going to throw in an extra one on that, and dodgy vape pens as a cause of fire now as well. Is there any work being done in that direction?
Yes, I think that did come up at the last Cabinet report when we were talking about the CRMP. So yeah, of course, we know that disposal of vapes is a really contentious area at the moment, and has caused us some issues in Norfolk, not only in refuse lorries, but also at recycling centres. So people are encouraged, particularly with the disposable vapes, to make sure they're disposing of them properly. You can take those to our recycling sites and dispose of them, but please, you know, to anybody listening, do not throw them in with your general recycling, because that can cause significant issues. And again, there are campaigns, and we're working with colleagues in waste to make sure that that message does get across to people. And obviously, there is now a ban on single-use vapes, which again, Trading Standards will be working with retailers to make sure that that's enforced. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bambridge.
Thank you, Chairman. In the document, round about page 48, we've got a lot of the section on misconduct. Can you give me an idea of what misconduct is about? Is it just not completing paperwork? Is it about banter? Or is it more serious than that? Because there are a couple of ambers, which I'm sure that they won't be amber for too long, because you'll get the processes underway. But misconduct is I should think, quite a wide area, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a very wide area, and I think one of the things that we've worked on very proactively across the service is making sure that people are really clear on the standards of behaviour that we expect. So that was our starting point, saying the high baseline, we expect professional conduct from anybody working within our service, and there's been a number of things that have supported that nationally, so bringing in DBS checking for everybody, but I think really it's more of a hearts and minds of understanding what's acceptable, understanding when your behaviour may be misinterpreted by other people or may be inadvertently offensive. So we've done a lot of education of our staff to say, you know, it's something that might have been considered, you think you called it banter, could be upsetting to others. So actually empowering people to say, actually, I did find that a little bit offensive, and can you not do that again, which sometimes is enough, or actually being able to bring people into line where a more robust form of sanction is needed. We also have an anonymous reporting line, which again was part of the recommendations that were in one of the national thematic reviews by HMI. So that's powered by Crime Stoppers. It's completely anonymous, and sometimes we are required to investigate allegations of misconduct and to understand what what's driving those. And one of the ambers that you've got on your screen is about putting welfare support in for people who are accused of having overstepped the mark or done something that's out of line with our professional standards, because again, we can't assume that all of those allegations will come to fruition or will need a formal sanction. Sometimes it's about conversation or about re-education. We've also put a professional standards function into the service, which we didn't have before, which means that we treat every allegation or report consistently. It's triaged by a professional services manager, a HR professional, and a senior manager from the service. And then if an investigation is required, that's commissioned in a very standardised way. So we've really tightened up our whole approach around this area, and hopefully that's being felt as a more inclusive and productive working environment by all of our staff.
Thank you very much. When are you in Kings Lynn? Because I know I've read about fires in sheds from electric bikes and things. Do you know when you're in Kings Lynn?
It's definitely this week. I can't.
Oh, is it?
Off the
Okay,
t-
well,
yeah,
I'll look
I
out
can't
for
off
you.
the top of my head remember the time and date, but I will send it to you after this meeting.
Thank you,
Councillor
thank you.
Ambridge. Thank you.
Well, you always like a local member aspect on these questions. Just in terms of that Councillor Mambridge's question about misconduct and standards within the service, well, I'll be right that those are exactly the same across the whole time and retained firefighters. There is no differential in terms of expectations there. Just wondering, are there different challenges given those two different types of workforce?
I think the main challenge is that the whole-time workforce, we are obviously their primary employers, therefore their kind of motivation to fall in line with standards and core codes of ethics and to sign up to those types of things, that's their primary focus. Whereas our on-call workforce, you remember 60% of our workforce are on-call, they are working for us as a secondary employment and their primary employment is somewhere else. And so it's been more challenging, to get out to them and have the conversation around codes of ethics, culture, standards of behaviour, but then also because the amount of time that they spend in the workplace, it's much lower, so it's harder to have that face-to-face management time and to be able to have the more kind of low-level conversations and kind of pick up on some of the behaviours that we would want to start to bring into a different shape. But on the whole, I think our workforce have been very receptive. Everybody wants to come to work, feel valued, get on well with their colleagues, and therefore it's in everyone's interest to kind of work with this. So on the whole, I think we've had a very good response from our workforce, and I wouldn't particularly single anyone out or any group out as kind of falling out of line more than others.
So I think there are a couple of particular challenges with the on-call, and as Kerry says, it's absolutely not to do with the calibre of people or their intent or their attitude or anything like that. I think one of the things is, and again, when the HMI make recommendations, they are very generic and they seem to favour some of maybe the metropolitan services. For instance, they've said that if someone gets promoted, they should be moved to another team for that promotion and not promoted within their team. It's very difficult to do that with the on-call because we're not going to ask them to move house just to take a promotion. And the same, when those low-level conflicts happen in a workplace, again, we have to be really, really positive with our restorative approaches to those because those people have to continue to work with each other. Again, we can't just move them into a different team. So that's a particular challenge. But I think where our on-call staff face a particular challenge is that they're very proud to be a member of Norfolk Fire and Rescue Service. And their community knows they're part of that service. They see them at fetes. They see them in their uniform going to and from work. They are really proud of that. But that's a double-edged sword because if you have a falling out with a neighbour, just a general kind of community dispute or anything like that, or even if they see you driving in a way that someone doesn't like, they will contact us and the public will contact us and let us know in a way that they probably wouldn't do if they knew they worked for a different employer.
Thank you for that. That's fine. Any other members wish to ask any questions on this matter or have a second go? Councillor Bambridge.
Thank you. Well, it's about the Grenfell aspect, Grenfell Tower aspect. Do we have any buildings that would come up to that, well, excuse the pun, but level in Norfolk? I would have thought but I know it's general across the country, and that's Stefan. You've worked on that, I think, haven't you?
Yeah. To work today. So we have around 50 buildings that hit the criteria of being taller buildings spread across the county. Obviously, not all buildings are high risk, but the bigger piece of work that we're doing at the moment is looking at the slightly smaller buildings, because some of the criteria has now changed. So we've set off a whole programme of work looking at those smaller buildings, and we're also very conscious not to forget other high-risk buildings like hospitals, like care homes, which, although have not been the focus of the Grenfell inquiry, we want to make sure that we are protecting all of the residents and people who are within those settings as well. So we assess risk kind of holistically and not just on that strict criteria. But yes, we do have some taller buildings. Obviously, we're not in the same position as London or Merseyside or Manchester. We don't have lots and lots of high rises, but we do have a number of buildings that we've focused on. But we work very proactively with the local councils, where they are the owners of those buildings, particularly in Norwich. We've got a very strong relationship and work very closely with the housing teams there to make sure that we're looking at all the recommendations and adhering to all the standards.
Yeah, and actually, in terms of buildings that meet that 18-metre criteria, we identified quite quickly that there were 5 recently built buildings in Norwich that met that criteria and had the same cladding that Grenfell had on it. And we worked with the responsible people to put in a full evacuation strategy. They put a temporary alarm system in. And more importantly, they worked with the developers and they remediated those buildings to get that cladding removed and replaced. We do know that we've got some other buildings that have remediation issues, and there are thousands of these buildings across the country. We do have some that are lower risk, but still we're working with them on making sure they keep the people within those buildings safe, and that we support the remediation bids.
Excellent news, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kittle-Morris.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I would thank the Chief Fire Officer and the team for this report. It was very interesting, and I think a few words on a page hide a lot of work which has been going on behind the scenes, and I think congratulations on that. Most of my questions that I've written about on my piece of paper have been asked by other people, and you've answered them very well. I'm interested in a couple of things. You've introduced a new colour into the RAG rating. You've now got a BRAG rating, so I think that's. But it does say right at the beginning that the blue is self-certification. What does self-certification mean? Where does that self-certification go to? Because you've got 3 different reports here. You've got one from the HMI, you've got one for Grenfell, and one for the Manchester Arena. And they're all related to different things. So who reports to what after that?
So the self-certification on the whole, I think probably is relevant to the HMI process for our specific areas for improvement. So they have a new process they've brought in where the Chief Fire Officer, in advance of the next inspection, is asked to certify that they are confident that all the criteria have been met, and then I have to upload a formal letter onto their portal to say I have reviewed all of this and I'm confident that we've met the criteria. Unless I do that in advance of the inspection, they will not consider changing it from an area for improvement. So I have to have signed it off in advance for them to look at it as being signed off when they come into service. So that's part of the self-certification. Obviously, the national inquiries are run by government. So again, we upload our information to various portals, sometimes with oversight from the National Fire Chiefs Council. And obviously, at any point, we can be audited on those, and the HMI will look at those when they come in as well and see how we've kind of progressed against those, and they'll do some sampling and testing to check whether what we've said meets the reality of what's happening within the service. But the real self-certification, if you like, is that formal sign-off of the areas for improvement.
Thank you. Councillor Price.
Thank you, Chair. Sort of just picking up on Councillor Banbridge's points regarding fire safety and high-rise buildings. In my ward, I have Normandy Tower, which is in Thorpe Hamlet, and obviously many residents contacted me in the aftermath of Grenfell. They were highly concerned. So it's assuring to hear that you've been working closely and well with district councils, particularly around their own housing stock. I was hoping you could provide me some more assurance in light of the self-reporting that Norwich City Council undertook for its fire safety failures that were highly notable. So you've provided some assurance around some of the actions that were immediately taken, and you've also provided assurance that you're working with them. But can you go into more detail about the risks of those failures by the local authority has had on your responsibilities? What steps and mitigations have you been taking in light of that self-reporting? You know, and how are you kind of highlighting and monitoring that with that local authority? Thank you.
So what I would say is that the City Council, along with others across the county, have been very proactive and responsive in terms of issues that have been raised and addressing them, and at all points when issues have been identified, we've worked closely with those individuals and teams to make sure that mitigating actions are in place, whether that's a waking watch or an enhanced response from our perspective, so we call it predetermined attendance. So I wouldn't want to get into too much detail in this session around the specifics of particular buildings, but potentially we could take that offline and meet with you if you've got some particular concerns. But just because issues have been highlighted, it doesn't mean that that organisation isn't being very responsive and proactive in their overall kind of duty of care to the residents as the responsible persons. But Steph, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, as I sort of ran our Grenfell Phase 1 response in the early stages, the City Council, we worked very, very closely with them on those initial stages around fire doors and things like that. But what I can say in terms of an internal kind of operational response, you know, I've been working in Norwich for 29 years. Those buildings have been there that entire time. And actually, in terms of our housing stock, that they are that old school, solid concrete building. We're very confident in its ability to do its job as a building and hold a fire within its sort of room of origin, or at least the flat of origin. And we are very well practiced at responding to incidents in those particular blocks. Loads of really good information provided with the council. We've done loads of exercises at those buildings. So we're confident that we're working well with the council, the City Council, to make sure any issues are dealt with. But more importantly, we're really confident in our ability to respond to an incident in those buildings.
Thank you. Thank you for the response. And I appreciate the response, because I don't want to sound alarmist, particularly with mentioning Normandy Tower. It is a building of significance in my ward, which, you know, reflects some of that risk that we see in Grenfell. I think I'll clarify the question a little bit more. So Norwich City Council have self-reported for fire safety standard failures, and notwithstanding the close working relationship and the positive steps that were made immediately on the ground after Grenfell by Norwich and yourselves, what additional mitigations have you been putting in place due to that failure to fulfil their basic requirement in that area? So that clearly has to have been a larger risk area that must have been flagged up as a risk when they reported themselves to the Ombudsman. So I'm just wanting to understand what mitigations were put in place and are still in place while that process unfolds. Thank you.
So I'll ask Stefan to come in and give some more detail around the specific mitigations that we put in buildings of that type. But what I would say is, when you look at the recommendations from the Grenfell reports, a lot and some of the wider, more publicised interventions by central government around building remediation, they are largely targeting building owners who will not engage and who will not work with local authorities or with their local fire and rescue services to identify and put right the things that need to be put right. So a self-reporting it is not necessarily a bad thing in itself, because, as I've said, they are engaging and they do want to make those improvements. And we are always very, very willing to work proactively with the organisation. And I said, I think if we can give you some generic kind of response changes that we would make to issues that would come up, and these would be the same in other types of settings as well as tall buildings, but I'll let Stefan run through a few of those.
Yeah, our protection teams that enforce fire safety regulations work very closely with all responsible persons for these kinds of buildings. And they can make recommendations and can enforce if they feel it necessary. And moreover, we have systems in place where we can enforce something like a full evacuation strategy, whereas those buildings, they're designed to be stay put. If there's a fire in one flat, everybody else should be safe in their other flats. We can put in a system where we say, no, you must put in an immediate evacuation, so if an alarm goes off, everybody comes out of the building, if we believe that the safety failings require that. We can even take a step further on that and put in a prohibition and do what we call a major decant, where we say this building is unsafe and people cannot stay there. I don't want to comment specifically on any particular building, but what I can say is in Norfolk, we have not got to the stage where we needed to implement either of those, other than on those buildings that we originally recognised needed remediation because of their cladding, which doesn't count for any of the City Council buildings.
Okay, thank you. I haven't seen any other members indicate just yet, but I'll look around the room again. So thank you to the Chief Fire Officer and to Stefan for your report today. In terms of what we've discussed today, I think as a committee we can say we are very pleased indeed to see the table on page 28 of the report, which shows that the total number of actions which were identified across the different action plans. I did a count up, I believe there's 151 in total, and 139 are being completed and are now being coded blue on the report, and 12 are still in progress. So, and all but 2, I think, are green. So we're in a very strong position as a fire service, and I thank Councillor Killamorris for raising that question about who checks that self-certification, so that we can have full assurance on that. We've looked at other areas today. Councillor Proctor has raised around those amber areas and how those will impact on our future inspection, and we've received some assurance on that about the measures which are being put in place. On the Grenfell item, we've discussed about high-rise buildings and with a particular focus on one area of the city, and we've had assurance on that. We've crossed areas around misconduct and how that is being interpreted as far as the culture of the organisation goes, and the role of diversity and inclusion in our recruitment. And amongst others, we received assurance about that the digital gap doesn't exist as far as the fire service is concerned with regard to its communications. So we've asked a range of interesting questions and have received assurance on those from the officers. What we're being asked to do today is, number 1, review the progress made to date against action plans outlining the areas for improvement arising from inspections of Norfolk Fire and Rescue by HMIC FRS, to note the progress made against the actions and recommendations from sector-wide HMIC FRS thematic reviews and national public inquiries, comment and challenge on areas where actions have been completed and progress is nearing completion, and to comment on challenge on areas where delivery is slower, risks remain, or further assurance is required. Are we consent committee that we've done that? And there are no further actions being identified. So thank you very much indeed for your attendance today, and we'll move on to the next item, which is over to you, Mr. Hopper, because that is an update on Norfolk County Council's policy framework.
Thank you, Chair. So, as the Chair's just alluded to, this update on the policy framework comes to you with committee having looked at it previously on the 22nd of October. Just for the benefit of those in the public gallery, the policy framework is a list of policies and strategies where full council is the approval body as opposed to cabinet or the executive of the council. So effectively what that means is all members discuss and vote on items in the policy framework where they're on that list. So this is a bit of a spring clean, as I say, since this committee looked at it last in October. It was requested to come back around the 6-month mark, and that's where we're at. There have been some updates as the select committees across the council have been working through their items and delivering scrutiny on those policy framework items. So members will see that the cabinet member view has now been added as per their request last time at the October meeting of committee. And they will also note that the annual investment and treasury management strategy was removed from the framework following the recommendation from this committee and then the resulting decision at full council. The role of committee today is effectively to sense check the framework as it is, have a look through the items, is there anything in there that shouldn't be in there, determine whether there are any items that need to be recommended to the other select committees for priority review. So that's it from me, and over to members for their thoughts.
Councillor Kemp.
Yes, I agree with all the items in there. There's a couple more that I still think ought to be there. As this council's a member of the Integrated Care Board with the NHS, I would recommend that the annual report of the Director of Public Health should be in there to be approved by full council, and also the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment. And of course, I approve moving towards zero waste, which has our policy of no incineration in Norfolk.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. So I suppose if there are any recommendations for changes to the framework, I'd need to see a recommendation put forward, seconded and voted on by this committee.
Thank you. We'll come back to that in a moment, Councillor Kemp. If that's all right, Councillor Proctor, you wanted to raise something.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of points, really. Hear what Councillor Kemp just said there, but they sound like reports rather than strategy documents. So to my mind, we've got, 12 in here altogether, and that seems quite a good balance across what we actually do. Just 2 points, really. One is around the next review date. So, for example, number 6, Minerals and Waste Plan, Local Plan 2038. Is there no interim review of that? It just seems a long way out for that. And then on a couple of them, 5 and 6, are they the right cabinet members for those two, the waste strategy and minerals and waste? They look more like Councillor Bensley ones to me.
Thank you, Councillor Proctor. So regarding the cabinet members, that's something happily take back and double check that. Regarding the minerals and waste interim review, that would be a matter for the Infrastructure and Development Select Committee to programme that in for their work. I think the reason why there is such a late end date is that this is a bit more of a sort of technical land use policy that we go through quite a robust process to refresh and add to the policy framework. So by that point, it's sort of by the point it's been reviewed, it's been quite robustly reviewed. So I think that's the reason why the stretches are so long for this. But that's absolutely something I can take back to the Infrastructure and Development Select Committee to look at for consideration. And just to answer your final point, I think the monitoring officer gave advice last time round when we looked at this item, which was that it's clear that they need to be policies and strategies, and as you say, rather than reports. So I hope that gives some clarification as well.
Thank you. I think I'd be right in saying, as far as number 6 is concerned, that was with regard to any type of local plan. Actually, as soon as you've got one nailed down, you start work on the next one. So I'm sure there will be interim reports and development, which will be going through the relevant select committee before that final sign-off, which is down for 2038. Councillor Kemp, did you want to make a specific proposal, or are you satisfied with the answers given?
Well, I do understand Councillor Proctor's point. However, I would say that in the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment and the annual report of the Director of Public Health, you've got the formulation of what's wrong in Norfolk, particularly around inequalities, and it does always point us in the right direction for what we need to do. So it's not just a report, it's about recommendations and analysis. So I think they go into very great depth. So I would like to propose that those 2 items are included.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So I think that's helpful to take that away, Councillor Kemp. Perhaps that could be something that the select committees look to examine as well. As you say, given that they are plans, what do they then feed into, and where's the sort of scrutiny behind that? So if that's helpful, that's something I'll take away with colleagues and ask them to look at for their respective committees.
Okay, you consent for that to be taken away on that basis, Councillor Kemp?
Yes, I'd be very happy with that. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much then. What we've been asked to do today then is to confirm or not that the list remains appropriate, to agree any amendments to be recommended to Council, and number 2, agree whether any existing items should be recommended for priority review by the select committee, which will be those who come after us, won't it? We haven't specifically addressed that point. Anyone wish to comment? Councillor Long.
Yeah, Chairman, just picking up on what Councillor Proctor said about the minerals and waste plan. I mean, obviously it is, as was mentioned, a sort of evolving document, but there is a requirement from government to massively increase housing delivery, and that in turn has impact on minerals that need to be extracted. Now, we did have a planning regulatory training session the other day, and that was a point that was made at that training session. But Caroline, the officer who leads on the plan, I think was happy that there's flexibility within. But I think it's something that obviously the policy maker side of things, rather than the regulatory side, needs to be minded of. And I think that training session probably highlighted that in any case. But if we do it as well through this route, then that hopefully will mean that it doesn't get missed by a future administration.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments in the room? In which case, I think we've agreed that the list is appropriate. We've not agreed any amendments, and we've not added any. We have not agreed for any existing items to be recommended for priority, other than the comments which Councillor Long has just made, which are noted. Are we all agreed? Thank you. In which case we turn then to item 9, local government reorganisation, standing item. There's a report on page 76. I haven't noticed any of the officers' phones go ping during the course of this meeting, so there haven't been any announcements in the last hour. There is a report in front of you. Sarah or Paul, did you want to add anything to that? And I think Councillor Smith wants to come in.
Morning, thank you, Chair. Nothing to add to the report, but as you'll appreciate, I'm very popular right now. No one can walk past my office without popping in and asking one of 2 questions. So let's get them out early. So have we had a decision? No. Do we have a date for a decision from government? Unfortunately, also no. What government have said is that they will stick to their timetable that they set out from the start. And to be fair to government, they have stuck to their timetable throughout the process. The timetable says March. So until we get to the 1st of April, they're not going to be late. So I know nothing extra in the year. I'm more than happy for people to continue to pop in, and you will, and ask the same questions. That's absolutely fine. But just to get them out early, Chair.
Thank you. And if it follows other announcements, it might be the 32nd or the 33rd of March that comes through. Councillor Smith.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Just really, obviously, as a leader of a district council, just to say, I know there's lots of good work going on behind the scenes from all councils. All 8 are working together. And as you rightly said, there's lots of speculation on a date. But until we hear the actual date and what's going to happen, and when we get the Minder 2 decision, we are all continuing to work together. And just to say that we will continue to work together, whatever that decision is. Thank you, Chairman.
Please do.
And just to follow up on that, absolutely agree. And whilst I wouldn't want to name any other areas, and I wouldn't, when we talk to external providers or consultants who are giving support to the sector, they are highlighting to us the approach that Norfolk has, this collaborative approach at an early stage, is very different to other areas. That the relationships and the working is much more mature, and there are other areas where people haven't got in a room together yet, for example. So we're in the best place we can be.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Price, you indicated.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's starting to heat up now. So I suspect the 25th of March will be a busy day at your office, but yeah, thank you very much. And yes, and it will be very interested to see the Minder 2. I think the report is asking us what to consider in April, and I think the one and only thing that we'll be talking about and delving into is the Minded to decision and the implications of it. And I think that would be the sensible thing for us to be discussing in April. But I think it's going to be a very interesting outcome where we've got, a Labour government, who, has a Labour council in the centre of a sea of traditional blue. My money. Can we even trust in the government actually producing this result? I mean, they decide to cancel elections on no legal basis, and then they do a U-turn. So this particular government can be turning itself. So we'll see it when it comes. But can you provide us any? It's great to hear Cole's point about the collective positive working between district and county. Can you give us any more information on whether or not there is alignment in what sort of structure a new council should be beyond the Minded to decision, whether or not that is a kind of a continuance or a complete dissolvement of existing councils? Because the reality is we were debating this at Norwich District last night, and they're very minded of the idea that it would be a complete dissolvement and a new construct of a new council. Obviously thinking it's going to be a Greater Norwich one in their opinion. Okay, thank you. That's my question.
If the question's about the legal entities which are councils, the expectation is that the government will abolish existing councils and require the establishment of new legal entities.
Thank you. Well, this is a standing item on our agendas because we didn't know if or when an announcement would come or so hence it's on there. Councillor Kemp, you have a...
Yes, I wondered if in the joint working with government over this, whether they've actually decided where the money would come from for the potential reorganisation, because we're looking at 35 million that we just haven't got, and the default would then be cutting services, which we can't have. And I was sort of telling residents the other day that the government gave us 321,000 last year to Norfolk councils to give to financial consultants to write reports on whether we should have 1, 2 or 3 councils. But for the want of £200,000, our only resident carers charity in West Norfolk closed because the council couldn't give it the money. And there's not one member of the public that thinks it was better to put money into consultants' pockets than to help unpaid carers. So already we're seeing, although they're different budgets, we're already seeing comparisons of where money's not being spent wisely. And looking at the reorganisation, it's apparent that sort of money is not going to be recouped, and that saving money with the delivery of services in a large rural county with dispersed populations, an ageing population, and poor or no transport in many villages, assumptions cannot be made about savings on economies of scale. So I don't know whether the mandarins in Whitehall have actually clock that yet. Do they understand the implications of what they might be doing with the people of Norfolk, which could actually be quite serious?
To go back to the first question, which is, our government going to give us the money to pay for the costs? I'm going to be a complete disappointment again and just say no. It's going to be my answer to everything today, isn't it? So no, government has not indicated any intention to give us or any other area that's undergoing local government reorganisation the money that would cover all the costs of making the change. Their position continues to be the new model. One of the reasons to put new models in place is that they will be cheaper, therefore you will make savings. We know the cost and the savings will not come at the same time. The cost will come first, savings may come later. So that will be a challenge for us. They have announced a few months ago some additional money for areas, which would equate to about £3 million for Norfolk, but they haven't actually told us it's £3 million for Norfolk or when that money may arise. And equally, it doesn't stop councils asking government for some more money once we get a decision, but I think the indications from them are no, and therefore we need to plan on the basis, once post-decision, on the basis of how do we organise ourselves to reduce cost and maximise savings in that early period.
Thank you. I don't think we're going to get into the place of all the things we'd rather be spending money on at the moment than local government reorganisation. We'd be here a long time. Andrew.
Yeah, just a quick comment on the finance. I think we've all recognised, the whole country that's going through LGR has recognised this is a government policy that came out of wherever it came from, but the government policy is you pay for it locally. And I think we've all got to recognise that. To my mind, if there's a priority area at the additional meeting, then that needs to be focused on the finance, because whatever happens, one of these proposals will come forward on the Minor 2 decision. One of those proposals is going to cost a lot of money. And I think whatever people have said about savings, those savings will not accrue in years 1, 2, 3, 4. No, whatever people may say, you just will not generate that level of savings. And that's been proven in North Yorkshire, for example. Now, they put a huge amount of money, 38 million, I think, into their budget for the change, but the savings have not yet all accrued, and they won't. So we have to be cognizant of that. And I think other authorities in other parts of the country are lobbying government to say, we can't afford this. Well, we can't. No, if it's 30, 35, 40 million quid up front, where does that come from? And so to my mind, if we're going to look at something in priority area at the next meeting on this, it's got to be the finance and where it comes from, how it's returned to the various authorities for the future.
Thank you. I think that's certainly noted. Councillor Price.
Yeah, no, I just want to come back in, and I agree with Councillor Proctor that the priority needs to be looking at the finance, because that's an immediate risk to the existing organisations. But I think the Minded To is bigger than that, and I think we should have we should really tuck into the feast that it will bring, and I think, you know, we should also be looking at the governance around the change of structure. And the steps that are being made, and also about the transformation opportunities. You know, I've been studying AI at the moment. We heard earlier about how the Oracle system doesn't work. There's going to be man hours on resource transferring different data across, which is just simply completely out of date in the modern working world now. These should be automations. You know, there is such an opportunity for a fresh look, for a fresh council to adopt so many different software models. And so I would like to start to see, once the Minded To decision happen, particularly if it is a single unitary, which would be reflective of this organisation in many ways, that actually this is a real opportunity to now jump into a completely new way of working. Because so many back-end tasks now are completely, irrelevant to be done manually anymore.
Thank you for the glass half full approach to this, Councillor Price. Because a lot of us are glass half empty, even if we have a glass at all. Okay, I think there's a limited what we can actually achieve this morning on this, and in terms of actually in April, there will be time limits on what we can achieve then, but probably what we will be hoping to do in April is actually to set a framework for what the next administration and the next committee is going to be looking at, and what sort of order they'll be looking at it in, so that they're not approaching it with a blank page when they come into office in May. We'll wait and see if we get the decision. I feel like, channeling the late Ted Rogers. Will it be a 3-2-1? We shall see.
Chair, do you need to explain it to our UEA guests who Ted Rogers is?
It's a cultural reference which I'm sure they can Google, Councillor Price, and that's fine. And there are videos on YouTube of him.
Dusty Bins on YouTube, I'm sure.
Indeed. Yeah, indeed. Okay, so what we've been asked to do today is to note the report, to identify any priority areas for discussion at the additional meeting. I think we don't know if it's a 3-2-1 yet, we're rather limited in what we can do there, but as we've already noted, there is a meeting scheduled for next month, which we will hopefully be able to start looking at some answers. Are we content to leave it there this morning? Fantastic. In which case, we move to item 10, the Forward Work Programme. Over to you, Mr. Hopper.
Thank you, Chair, and that's a good segue, I think, because first of all, I'll ask committee if they're happy just to cover this work programming segment now rather than hold an extended session. That was originally in the paper, but I think given that we know what we want to look at, we can just do it now, if that seems good. Seeing nods. Perfect. So the first thing for us to do is obviously to formally agree to add the meeting in for the 22nd of April. And obviously members have provided some steer and scope on what they'd like to see in that report already. And I know that Sarah will have taken those points down, so that's very helpful. Just to ask committee, is that everyone happy to agree that? Perfect. Thanks. Secondly, and this is the last bit from me, you'll probably be relieved here, I've been asked if committee will consider the annual review of the compliance and enforcement policy. So whilst this is an item that sits within trading standards, it covers a wide range of regulatory and enforcement functions across Norfolk County Council. That includes things like flood and water management, highways enforcement, fire safety, minerals and waste planning, as we talked about, enforcement of those. And basically this policy provides a single consistent framework for how we go about enforcing. There's the question of whether that is an item for this committee due to the alignment with trading standards, or whether this committee feels that that's something that the Infrastructure and Development Select Committee should examine, given their role with those areas as well. So I wanted to just put that one over to members to see if there are any thoughts particularly on that. That's it from me.
All done at once. Any thoughts, committee? Keep it here. I think it's scheduled to be here already. I don't see any clamour for it to be moved over to the other select committee.
That's fine, thank you. There was a request that that comes to this committee if that's what we decided in July. So just to say that to sync with that governance route, would this committee be happy for that to be programmed in, and then I move trading standards scrutiny to September to make way for that?
We all content? Okay, thank you. Are there any additional items that people would think should be added to the work programme, given that we're not going to have a programming session after this meeting as we'd originally thought? I did discuss that previously with Mr. Hopper, and we thought we're in a slightly different place at this meeting than we were last time, and there might not be the same appetite to look into the future for what this committee is going to do that there was last time as we sit here. So we'll do it all in committee today. Are there any additional items, members? I don't see any, in which case we've already dealt with the meeting in April. That's been agreed. We've agreed about the additional item which was raised. So we have reviewed and suggested any changes to the forward work programme, and I believe that is complete. So thank you all very much. That concludes business for today. Thank you all very much indeed for your contributions. Thank you.